interesting background. I left school at like 17. I always had this mentality that things would work out, but I realized along the way that nobody was going to hand it to me. I happened to fall into like an assistant job. It was just supposed to be for one day. I showed up and I put in the work and I got invited back the next day. Within 8 months, I worked my ass off so hard that I became an executive. I think pain and suffering really mold people into greater things. I'm not the smartest guy, but I worked really fucking hard. And I think that's what really set things apart.
Leonardo Danconia, he is the CEO of Inbounds, and he's also the founder and CEO of a brand new company that's going to really revolutionize the industry, TrueCall.
TrueCall is essentially a tool to document evidence of consumer call initiation. That is at its core what it does. You know, initially the idea was like, let's create something for our agency, but then it quickly turned into like, why would we keep this for ourselves?
I signed up for the TrueCall. At the end of the day, this business is all about credibility.
Right.
You lose your credibility, you're freaking done.
We want to give and empower the generators and the end users to be able to manage their own risk and their own compliance. I think we live in such an exciting time where the tools available to us have never been there before. And if you just constantly create and look for new ways to provide value and solutions, I think at the end of the day, you're always going to be doing well.
LFG fam, we just shot a fucking banger right now. I can't wait till you hear this shit. It's like next level. No one's talking about this. Shout out to our sponsors, because without them, this shit wouldn't be possible. Shout out to Ringba. Shout out to Adam Young, the paper call revolution. There's big money in paper call, whether you're someone who's a novice looking to get into it, whether you're someone who's already doing it, putting up big numbers. Let's fucking do this, guys. Get the fucking book on Amazon. We're going to drop a link here. Take your shit to the next level. Let's fucking go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the LFG Show. Man, we're going nonstop here. We got a good friend of mine. I've known this guy for a long time, done a good amount of business with him. Leonardo Danconia, he is the CEO of Inbounds, right? And he's also the founder and CEO of a brand new company that's going to really revolutionize the industry, TrueCall, right?
Yeah, man.
So I'm excited to have you on the show because listen, at the LFG Show, we talk to next level people doing next level things. I think you're a next level person. You think differently, you move differently, right? And now you have a product right now that's going to really change the industry and create a lot of value for people. And we'll go deep into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And before we go there, shout out to our sponsor, Ringba, Adam Young, the Paper Call Revolution, phenomenal book. One thing in the book that he talks about is paper call fraud. Right. And I think your product is a perfect solution for that. So we're going to talk about that. But before we talk about it, Leo, our industry is freaking crazy. A lot of moving parts. How'd you get into the industry?
Yeah, man. I had an interesting background. I left school at like 17. Yeah, I didn't go to college, and I always had this mentality that things would work out, but I realized along the way that nobody was going to hand it to me, right? That was probably the biggest lesson in life that really changed my trajectory, which is just like, nobody's coming to save you, right? I got to do everything myself, and I got to figure out how to, make it happen. And so I started just entering the workforce and grinding and trying to figure out how to learn. I went to YouTube University, right? I was up studying.
It's a great university if you apply it, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And, we're so lucky in this day and age to have those kind of tools available, right? There's just so much free content where you can learn so much. A lot of stuff to sift through, and not everything makes sense. So it's not necessarily like a great curriculum that's lined out for you, but all the same, it's a very powerful tool. And I think maybe when I was 21, I was actually doing Uber. Right. I just was trying to make.
This is in California?
Yeah. This is in California.
SoCal, right?
Yeah. And I was literally just trying to eat and just pay my bills. I had left my 9 to 5. I just was kind of sick of, that kind of culture. It was very corporate culture, and that works for some people, and that's all good. But at that specific job, I was unhappy. Yeah. I felt like there was more in my life, and I wanted to explore that. But I was met with the reality that it's not easy. Right. And so I was driving Uber to, put some food on the table, and I happened to fall into like a gig job. TaskRabbit, ever heard of that? Anyway, it's just when you're kind of doing random tasks that people pay you for. You can be moving a couch or installing furniture or whatever it is. And stumbled across an assistant job. It was just supposed to be for one day. for a guy who actually ended up owning a marketing company.
Wow.
And I just came in with the attitude of like, I don't know what this opportunity is like. The guy hired me for a day. I'm just going to do my best today. That's all I can do is just, I'll stay late. I'll ask for whatever they need and I'll just do whatever it takes. And so I showed up and I put in the work and I got invited back the next day and the next day. And all of a sudden, within a few weeks, he's like, why don't you just come work full time? And so I started working for him, learning about marketing, learning about the industry. And within 8 months, I worked my ass off so hard that I became an executive at that company.
And how old were you at the time?
I was like 22.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was really my first start in the industry where I was like, you know, I don't know what I want to do, but I'm obviously good at this. And so I'm just going to go hard and, you know, I have great work ethics. So I just applied that and obviously it opened some doors for me. And, you know, from there, I decided, hey, this is great. And I like this. The owner at the time, though, wanted to pivot the company to a different direction. This was a time when kind of mortgage refi was big campaign or kind of area.
What year was this around?
Like 18?
Okay.
It was like 18. It was doing really well, but then with what happened with the mortgage industry, a lot of the lenders stopped buying, you know, leads, or I think their biggest client shut down. And so the owner wanted to pivot into another field, and he was an entrepreneur, and I appreciated that, but I couldn't help but think that there's still such a great opportunity in lead gen and marketing. And obviously I learned a lot about it. So I decided to just start my own company. I had $1,000, $2,000 probably in my bank account. And I was like, I'm just going to go for it. So with no prior experience as an entrepreneur, no ton of business, I just absolutely went for it. I think I had some crypto that I was gunning for. I was like, this crypto is going to go to the moon.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be fine. And, you know, if this business doesn't work, I'll have crypto. Well, I don't have to tell you how that story ended.
Yeah.
But essentially, it was just myself trying to rub together two little matchsticks to make a business, and started with just some existing people I had met and trying to put two and two together. I started with just straight out, you know, brokering calls because that's just what I knew. And then as that grew, I was like, wow, there's something really here. You know, there's a lot of opportunity here. And I literally just grinded my ass off for about a year until I can figure out how to make enough money to kind of sustain myself without a job. And, you know, I sacrificed a lot of things during this time. I didn't go to parties. I didn't hang out with really anybody. I just sat on my computer all day trying. I was just locked. I was just dialed in. And that's when I started getting some momentum and I started learning a lot more. I always continued my education. I felt like, you know, not going to college was a blessing, but there were cons to that too, because I was missing things, right, in my kind of my toolkit, right? Like I didn't know about business. I didn't know about taxes. I didn't know about EINs, corporate structure, EBITDA, P&Ls, balance sheet, all that type of stuff. I had to teach myself everything. And so that was really successful for me as I continued to go forward, was just constantly learning. And that was really the start. That was like the LFG moment. I remember, you know, making 10 grand in a month. I was like, this is freaking amazing. I did this all myself. And
yeah, 10 grand is like that mark. Like once you hit that,
I was like,
yeah, it's so funny.
Wow, there's something here, you know? And that was such an aha moment. And I remember telling my buddy I went to high school with, I'm like, wow, like I made this money. And he's like, that's amazing. Like, how are you doing this? And I'm like, I have no idea. But I'm making it happen. And, you know, I persevered and there was ups and downs, but just throughout this whole time, constantly learning, going to trade shows, networking, creating relationships, creating friends, you know, trying to keep a good reputation and doing right by people, I think has really led me to where I am now. And, you know, I think that at the end of the day, I'm not the smartest guy. I'm not the most, you know, whatever. I don't know everything, right? But I worked really fucking hard. And I think that's what really set things apart. And I also didn't pretend like I knew everything. I knew where I was lacking, right? I knew where I didn't understand things. Instead of shying away from those things, I attacked them. I was like, let's learn more about that, right? That's something I don't understand or that makes me uncomfortable. That means I need more of it, not less of it.
Yeah. Man, that's a great story. And I'm glad you shared that. And, you know, I would never, I assume you graduated college and stuff like that. And the fact that I've always had this thought in Israel after I think everyone graduates high school, they go into the military, for 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And I read this book, what's it called? Startup Nation. And it talks about why is Israel so successful and powerful considering it's such a small percentage of the world population, but there's so many other percentage of people on the NASDAQ. Half the billionaires in the world are Israeli or Jewish, right? So it's just an amazing story. But I've always had that thought, like maybe this system in America is kind of flawed. And like, why do we go straight from high school into college and have to determine what we're going to do for the career? Like, do we need a year or two gap? I thought about doing that with my kids. You know, that I think that real life experience is very important. So I wanted to ask you, did you ever feel like a stigma not graduate? Do you feel like or did that give you like a chip on your shoulder? Like, I'm going to fucking do this regardless.
Yeah, man. I think that at the end of the day, I think pain and suffering really mold people into greater things, right? Like if you think Hormozy says, right, if you want great character, you can't wish for an easy life.
Yeah.
You know, and I really believe that's true because there was a time when I was sitting 3 a.m. In my car. I just got done Ubering for the night on a Saturday night, okay, at 3 a.m., just taking some people who were very drunk home. And I was just sitting in the car listening to Slipknot. And I was like, this cannot be my life. I cannot do this. I will not stand for this. There has to be more, right? And I was just so sick and tired of being sick and tired that I just decided I am going to do everything in my power to change this because no one's coming to save me, you know? And I think that's what made me what I am today. And I never forget that. I never forget where I came from.
Yeah. And I think there's a commonality among anyone that's been successful, anyone ever had on this show, that you have to have that feeling. What the hell am I doing in my life? I'm worth more, right?
Sure.
I can give a lot more to the world, to myself. And once you have that moment, that comes from pain and suffering. That's the only way to do it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think I saw something recently, some kind of speech, I think CEO of NVIDIA, talking about how I wish for you to have pain and suffering. I wish upon you pain and suffering because that's going to build your character, you know? And I think that at the end of the day, you don't have to be the sharpest, you don't have to be the smartest, but having resilience and a work ethic that rivals, you know, the top people in the world is going to set you apart over talent.
Wow, that you made me think a lot with that, and I thought you're big into philosophy, right? But so that's kind of that tied in there. But I'm thinking about my daughter's 12.
Sure,
she's gonna be high school, so then college. My son's going to turn 5 and have a newborn. You don't want to see your kids suffer, right? But they have to, man. And I guess you got to guide them through that when they're going through it. Let them know that, like the CEO of NVIDIA said, I wish you pain and suffering, because that's the only way you're going to grow. If you don't have that, then I mean, it's going to come one way or the other, right? It doesn't matter how you deal with it. So thank you for talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even today, I mean, obviously I've had some level of success, and, you know, life is a lot better than it was, but not easy, you know. Like we get on this show, we talk about the highlights, but
no one sees the other stuff.
No one sees the other stuff. And I think that it's just new levels, new devils. You know?
I like that. New levels, new devils. Wow.
Yeah. You know, it's just, you get to everything's relative, right? So you kind of come up and then you have different problems, but they could be bigger problems, right? Or there's a different nature to them, but they're still problems. And no matter where you are, right? The problems are going to be there, right? Yeah. That's how you choose to be resilient. Like some days I'm like, damn, like I had a really bad day and I'm working, you know, 17, 18 hours a day sometimes, and I'm exhausted, you know, but I know where I came from, and I would much rather prefer that than, you know, not living up to my potential.
You control your destiny. And I think going back to the true core product, you have control, and that's what you need. And everyone wants to have control over life. So when you were working in the job you hated, you didn't have control, or they controlled you, and you wanted to kind of break that matrix is what it came down to, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I just whatever, I just felt like there was something bigger, and I just would feel like a disappointment to myself if I didn't try my hardest. You know, and some people try, but then there's really trying, right? There's really a difference between wanting something and wanting it to your core so much that it consumes you, right? And I think that is the level that you have to get to really make change and pull yourself out. You know, obviously there's different levels to where people start, right? Some people you could say had a better head start or whatever, which may or may not be true. But no matter where you are, if you're trying to get to the next level on your own, you kind of have to really want it, not just say you want it, but want it to the, fiber of your being.
And I'll say one thing too, what impressed me about what you said, and I find out with a lot of people, especially in my circle, that that are successful, the humility, right? To me, I think a lot of people that know you say you're super, super smart, right? And the fact to hear you say, I'm not the smartest guy, and that's great to hear it, because you can get better, and you always keep learning, you keep reading, you're doing all these things to better yourself. So I think that's another commonality about really success. We know we're not, you got to know you're not the best. There's always someone better, and there's always some evolution, something that can take you out of the game. So you got to always be ahead of the curve.
Absolutely. And nothing in this life stays the same forever, right? We're either evolving or we're regressing, right? And so for me, I feel good. I feel happy when I'm constantly evolving.
Yeah.
And constantly learning, and it's fun. It's challenging, right? Like, I'm the type of person to figure something out and then kind of get bored of it, because I'm like, maybe this is good, great. Like, it's a good thing that's productive and helps people. But for me mentally, I'm like, I got to challenge myself, right? If I get used to something, that's not fun. That's not exciting for me, So a lot of it too is just, I feel like life is a video game. Right? And if you beat one level, you don't want to keep playing that level all the time.
I love that. That's great. That new levels, new devils was freaking fat. You got me thinking. It's so freaking true. You're really right about it. Is there an example of your personal life where maybe you got to this other level that you were like so excited, where you did, I don't know, maybe it was something dumb that you're like, why the hell did I do it? You wouldn't do again, that you would share?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. You said something that I did, but I wouldn't do again.
Yeah, or maybe you learned from it, like, well, I feel like we all do that. I don't know, especially in our industry.
Yeah, man. I mean, I could tell you about times where I was like, oh, it's a great idea. Let's pour $100K into this untested
on the whim,
campaign.
Right?
Just dump it, just go. And then I'm like, why the hell did I do that? Right? Like, that taught me a little bit about risk management, right? I mentioned earlier that I had a kind of a foray into crypto trading, and
it's funny. You gave me a ticket to Bitcoin. There was a Bitcoin conference 3 years ago when I was getting involved in it and whatever.
Right.
And I don't know why you couldn't go, and it was sold out, but like, you hooked me up, man. And, But when you said that, I remember that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I lost everything in crypto.
Yeah.
And well, it's actually a really funny story, because I made more money in crypto by doing nothing than I did by spending hours looking at a computer screen every day.
Right?
Yeah, like, I actually made way more money by just literally doing nothing. And that taught me a really valuable lesson of, like, we talk, it's very cliche, like, work smart, not hard. But like, just because you're doing something, you have to be very deliberate about what you're working on, right? And what you're doing, because just because you're grinding, this is something I think entrepreneurs sometimes get a little bit lost, is like, sure, you're working your ass off, great. That's like step one. But what are you working on, right? Like, is the thing that you're working on smart? Is it a high leverage opportunity? Or are you spinning your wheels to grind out a little bit of profit or potentially lose?
Crumbs, yeah.
Right. And then, you can get into things like the sunk cost fallacy, which also correlates to your time, right? You spend a lot of time into something, and then you feel this obligation that you have to keep doing that thing, even though you really shouldn't, right? But it's just because you sunk so much time into it, you're like, damn, if I give up now, I'm a quitter. But that's not necessarily the smart thing to do, right? It's like picking the thing to work on and going at it with an edge is way more important than necessarily just hitting your head against the wall for the fact of saying I'm grinding, So that was something I learned too, is not just working your ass off, that's a given, but working your ass off on things that have the highest chance of success while mitigating risk is a big lesson I've learned.
And that's great. I've learned that through experience too. I read a book called 10X is Easier Than 2X. Yeah. I've really changed the way I look at things.
Right.
I'm always someone that's always on the move. You know that. I'm like just doing a million things, but I had to analyze, is this a 10X thing I'm working on, or is it 2X? And some of the stuff wasn't even 2X. Some stuff like 1.2X. Like, my time is more valuable than that, right? So when you start thinking along those lines, man, your business really starts to accelerate. You look into bigger opportunities, because our time is limited, right? We only have so much time on the earth.
Exactly.
Like, you got to focus on the things that are going to really, really move the needle.
Yeah, 1000%. And that's a big lesson too, is the concept of leverage, right? You know, Archimedes said, if give me a lever long enough and a place to stand and I'll move the earth, right? And that's so true, right? You can choose to work on things that in theory sound good, but if you're trying to get the maximum impact for your time, you must choose those things that have the highest leverage, right? Or you just might, if that's your goal, right? If obviously people have their own passions and do whatever they want, that's great. But if you're trying to do something big, you're gonna be in a better position if you start with something that's a higher leverage opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. So, but yeah, that crypto story was crazy because like when I invested again in crypto when I wasn't focused on watching the ticker, kind of go up and down every day, and I just let it sit, and I was like, holy shit, I've made way more money than I ever, crazy.
And they say sometimes the better action is to do nothing at all, right? That's one of those examples. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it taught me patience as well.
That's awesome. So I know you're big into philosophy, right? What if there's one philosophy book or philosopher that kind of made a big impact on your life, and you recommend that the users or listeners of the LFG show listen to or learn more about, who would that be, or what book would that be?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't necessarily have one particular one because so many people have impacted the field, in terms of philosophy, and I've really essentially distilled down a lot of the things I've learned. I kind of get snippets from here and there from people I look up to, people like Alex Hormozy and guys like that who are doing awesome things. And I kind of take little bits and pieces from everywhere and find what's real for me. And I would say not necessarily like, hey, you got to check out this thing. I would more urge people to remember that things are only as good as they're useful to you, right? And you should never do something just because somebody has authority and expertise, because if that thing doesn't work for you, then it really doesn't matter, and you should discard that, right? And you should focus on those things that actually have practical application and actually change your life for the better, and not do it just for the sake because somebody told you to do it, right? You got to see it for yourself.
That's great advice, especially nowadays with so much, get hit with so much information on and there's TikTok, there's Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it. You got
everybody's
YouTube,
an expert.
Everyone's an expert nowadays,
Totally.
right? So you got to really analyze, and especially your feed, who are you subscribed to? Because you're going to get that information. It's going to impact you at a subconscious level.
Absolutely.
Age data. There's only a few months left of this.
A lot of different ways to monetize data. Data is a very broad term. There's a lot more money in it. You already spent the money. Let's just say it cost you $10 for a Medicare lead. You make $1 million in sales, you really only made $100,000.
And you might not get paid by your advertiser.
What if I can get an extra 50 cents, $1, $2, $3 per lead in perpetuity? What does that do to my marketing campaign? What does that do for the stress of the profits of my company? A percentage or two at those kind of numbers are huge as moving the needle. So for us, what I love about age data, the hard part's already been done. Now it's just a revenue left for your company. What would the extra $10, $20, $30,000 a week do for your business?
Absolutely.
All of our big partners are making hundreds of thousands, if not millions a year with us. They're never going to have this gold rush again.
Let's talk about your, what you've been doing. I mean, I know you through inbounds.com. Explain who they are, and then we'll talk about the evolution into TrueCall.
So yeah, inbounds.com is really the brainchild of myself and our partners, who kind of all had kind of separate companies, right, in the space. And we came together and we were like, hey guys, like, why are we trying to do this kind of half-cocked? And why don't we come together and try to create something a little bit bigger than the individual sum of our parts? And that was really the genesis of Inbounds. My partners are amazing guys with even more experience than me in the industry. And that was really the idea. It's like, hey, let's do owned and operated. Let's create our own websites. Let's get our own technology together, hire a dev team and essentially go from there. And that has been an amazing journey. We've grown it from, absolutely nothing to doing a solid amount of top line every year. And, I think we have 45 employees now, which we're it's the most employees I've, ever had. And so it's been a rocket ride for sure.
And the bulk of what you do, the main focus is legal, right? And inbound.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for us, while we do some insurance and we do some home services, legal is where we just found a lot of blue ocean. and we were able to kind of get in there a little bit earlier, and try to find some kind of edge. And we have established a lot of good clients in the space, working with lawyers and attorneys, etc., which, for some may not be their cup of tea, but, to each their own. And I think that the relationships that we have forged are awesome and will be sustainable long term.
And I think that's in our industry, everyone's always trying to make money. There's a lot of money in the industry, but there's a lot of shiny object syndrome as well, which I'm sure you see. You go to these shows and like, what's the next thing? And right. I went to the Geek Out on Saturday, Geek Out tour, and there was a lot of anxiety, I think, because there's a lot of shakeup going on in ACA. I'm sure you've seen there. A lot of shakeup going on. People that's billion-dollar companies stop buying leads. There's like federal investigations, go like crazy stuff's going on. So people are nervous. They're looking for the next thing. But I think what you guys are, you narrowed in. Illegal's evergreen. That's not going to go anywhere. I heard 17,000, 20,000 people get into a car accident every day, something along those lines, right? But it's not easy to penetrate.
No, and that's a great point, because like you just said, there's really like a finite amount of car accidents out there, right, for MBA, and there's only a finite amount of qualified victims of mass tort. And so, while it has some evergreen nature, the kind of the rub is that low supply aspect, which is kind of hard to penetrate,
I want to say something. So I went to my first Mass Torts Made Perfect. Have you ever been to MTMP?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
It was an amazing show, and it blew my mind away. So we're doing some stuff in Tor, not a huge amount. We'll have to grow into that. But anyway, the numbers that they're talking about, and there weren't any flashy guys there. I mean, these are lawyers that are putting up big numbers. They have the tort with Johnson & Johnson, the talc.
Yeah.
It's
terrible.
Yeah. You see, they're talking about $6 to $10 billion settlements they're going after. And it makes you think, man, I got to think bigger here. And the one thing I want to say is that some people warned me about that. So, hey, you're not going to have any success. They look down on marketers, this and that. But at the end of the day, I mean, I didn't see that. I felt like, people are people. You treat them right and you honor your word. So how were you able to penetrate? And you didn't just penetrate that industry, but you have actually been doing it for a long time. So you've had success and grown, 8-figure business with doing that.
Yeah.
So, how'd you do that?
It's a great question. I think that, as you kind of mentioned, attorneys are maybe a little bit more cautious about who they work with. I think they have a lot on the line to risk, especially.
Yeah, the reputation is important.
Ethics is a massive aspect of everything an attorney does. Yeah. And, if given enough transgressions, they could potentially lose their license over, bad marketing, right? Or not following marketing laws. And so really putting compliance first and putting an emphasis on, hey, we're doing things the right way, was really kind of the game changer. But still took time, to really get some trust established. And it's still, not, it's still kind of a challenge, but I think that was a kind of a game changer for us. Is just like, hey, let's get as compliant as possible, be as transparent as possible. And that would help, grant more trust to what we were doing.
Yeah. And I can tell, I mean, when I have people on the show, guests on the show, it's only guests that I know are top-notch people. So this is my reputation online too. I don't want to, I feel like I built up my brand, my credibility by being surrounded by good people, right?
Yeah.
So I've worked with you guys in the past. We ran an MVA campaign for a couple of years. It was pretty successful. When my call center was working with you to create transfer fill out, and just working with your team and seeing that you guys always honored. You always looked out for your client. And in the beginning, it wasn't, it was a new campaign for us. So there were mistakes made on my side. We had to put in quality assurance, but we fixed it, right? And you worked with us through that. And that was key. And I think that, guys, you talked a lot about communication and transparency. And that's a big issue with our industry, and is that everyone wants to sell leads, right? But they don't always sell what they say they're going to sell. They sell like a bag of goods. And then at the end of the day, you're the one that's taking the risk because your name's on the line. These lawyers are taking a risk with a new lead vendor, right? So they're going to be cautious, like you said.
Yeah, 1,000%. And some of these attorneys have just crazy levels of vetting that they will put you through. They're looking for any reason to say no. Yep. This isn't up to snuff.
Yeah. And when I was at the show, I heard about, they're always with a bunch of attorneys. They're talking about how, I guess one guy was doing some unscrupulous stuff, and he's like, someone in the industry, I don't know name. I have no idea. It was people with decades and decades, and they're like, now he's done. Like, he can't even practice anymore. And that's a shame to, spend so much time doing something and then be done. But that applies to our industry as well. Mm-hmm. I narrowed in on solar in 2016, became top 5 in the industry in solar lead gen. We're still doing solar. Solar's changed a lot, obviously. But the point is that if you narrow in on something, you do the right thing by the clients, the right thing will come back to you. And sometimes people lose sight of that.
Absolutely. And, you know, look, like everything that we do is difficult, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there is a line that just needs to be walked. But like you said, in the long run, you know, if you stay on the right side of that line, it will come back to you and pay dividends.
Yeah. And you guys are shining proof of that. So I want to transition a bit here into what you're doing right now. And this ties into pay-per-call. Pay-per-call, I think, is about to explode because of all this new changes going on with single opt-in and everything. I just interviewed Adam Young on the show from Rainbow. Yeah, great interview. Tons of opportunity. But alongside, anytime there's big money involved, there's going to be unscrupulous people looking to get over on people, right? And you were, I don't know what the better word, but you're a victim of that, right? So were your clients in the sense, and because of that, you created a solution. And I want to talk about my experience. I've been doing this since 2016. Mm-hmm. There's something called a dumb tax in business. You do some dumb thing and then you pay
the ignorance tax,
dumb tax, right? So
absolutely.
You
pay it down over time.
Yeah. So back in 2018, 2019, you know, I'd have some guys I trusted. I'd buy leads from them. It turns out these leads weren't compliant. I had some issues, TCPA, had to like get attorneys involved, cost me a lot of money. And one big one wound up costing me 6 figures, 150 grand it cost me. Then like a year later, I had another one that was 60 grand. So all in all, these dumb things, the ignorance tax, dumb tax, wound up costing my company, me, probably $300,000.
Sure.
Which is, for a lot of people listening, that's $300,000, a lot of money to throw out the damn window, right? So I learned, I buttoned myself up, knock on wood, we haven't had any issues in like 3-4 years. We buttoned ourselves up, right?
Awesome.
Have a compliance department, all this stuff, right? That audits. You had a similar experience, but yours was way, way bigger. When I heard the number, like, holy fuck, how did you make it through this? So can you, let's talk about that whole situation.
Yeah, no, it's definitely burned in my memory, and I'll just give you the full story. I mean, we were trying to augment our internal marketing efforts, right? Which is not a bad thing to do. You know, you can.
That's how you scale.
Yeah, it's how you scale, and you maybe scale quicker. And so, you know, we have some great relationships with clients, and we were sending them our calls, which was fine. We were like, hey, you know, maybe there's some trusted partners who we respect and know in the space who would be able to send us some additional calls. It's a win-win, classic kind of setup. And so, you know, we were obviously cautious, and we went into it like, hey, like, we want to make sure we're getting inbound phone calls, right? That was the first thing. Like, let's make sure we're on the same page here. And we must have went through that like 3 or 4 times. These are inbounds for sure. They're inbounds. Like, you know, you're not going to give us anything else. They got to be inbounds, etc. And this company swore up and down on their life that absolutely these are totally inbound calls. Don't worry about it. You know, you don't have to keep asking us, right? We almost were becoming annoying. Like, want to make sure. It was also through a referral, so we felt like there was some added trust there. Yeah. But that was the issue, right? Is that kind of blind trust without verification. And unfortunately, you know, while we started getting calls and they were great, we started getting some inbound calls and we're like, wow, the quality is great. Like, this is looking good. All of a sudden I get that phone call, you know.
A dreaded call.
Shut everything down immediately, right?
And it's never had a good time. It's always the worst time of the day.
Yeah. And it's on a, you know, Monday morning, you're just waking up, shut it all down, or it's Sunday, whatever.
Yeah.
And, you know, what had happened was when we started to investigate it, you know, we were like, what's going on here? You guys promised us inbound calls. And they're like, yeah, it's totally, like, they were still kind of defending that these were inbound calls. And at the end of the day, what happened is that it was actually, in my opinion, a little bit worse than, you know, some kind of professional plaintiff or litigator or whatever. It was actually a retired judge.
Oh.
You know, essentially got a phone call that was an outbound call, right? And there's something in the legal space called solicitation, right? You're not allowed to solicit people for legal services unless they asked, you know, for information about your services. They kind of have to lead the way, similar to how the TCPA, you know, you're supposed to consent to be contacted. But there's this whole, you know, other very similar thing in the ethics codes called solicitation. And he decided, or he, you know, was getting solicited for, I guess, motor vehicle accident. And he didn't just stop at like, hey, let's, you know, you guys are violation of TCPA, like, I'm going to sue you. No, he went all the way up to the end user, which was an attorney in this case, right? He got the attorney to come to his house, right, unbeknownst to him, and cornered him and said, hey, you're soliciting I'm going to the state bar. And when a retired judge or anybody complains to the state bar about solicitation, it's super serious, right? And so, what ended up happening was, we lost our client, which was a client who was spending millions of dollars a year, right? So that was a massive loss, massive hit. In addition to that, we had to do some kind of reparations and give back to them. We felt very responsible for this issue, even though it didn't come from us. We wanted to take full ownership of that. And so we ended up having to give them a lot of money. And, in total, total loss with fees and time and loss of revenue and invoices, it came up to something like $2 million in total that we estimate.
There's a $2 million. Think about that. I told them my issue was 300,000 or something like that. Yours is way, way higher. So when I heard that number, man, I'm like, damn, I can't imagine. But it's starting to cut you off there. But I appreciate the resiliency because that happens in business, right? And that was because number of factors. It's happened to me too. A couple of my issues happened because of that blind trust. And the referrals, referrals most of the time, 90% of the time, you're good.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's that 5 or 10% where you place your blind trust and you don't inspect, and then bam, you get.
Or
that
even
happened
you
to me.
Inspect, and the crazy thing about this is that the company we had this issue with, they weren't trying to do this maliciously per se. Per them, the issue was that one of their account managers simply just crossed wires. They sent us calls we weren't supposed to receive, right? And so that kind of added some salt to the wound because it wasn't even purposeful.
Like negligence.
It was just straight up a mistake. Yeah. But when one phone call can hurt your reputation and one phone call can really, lose you a lot of money and cause such massive headaches, you start to look at hey, is this blind trust thing? Is this really a strategy? Can you rely on that in your business? And we decided no.
Yeah. That's great. And it's a great story. It wasn't great at the time, but it's great that you were able to bounce back from it. And because of that, now you have a solution that's not just for you guys, but for the whole industry. So I want to talk about that. First of all, I guess before we talk about it, let's rewind a little bit and talk about when you got that phone call and you went through this. I imagine you didn't sleep. You and your partners what the hell? Did you think you were going to go out of business? Let's talk about those moments, because I think those are the moments that define people as entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, we were shocked and obviously a bit perturbed, but this is something, being in the industry, that we have seen in other ways. When I first got started in the industry, it like you said, you pay down the tax of ignorance, right? And so when you're relying on third parties, sometimes if you don't have the knowledge of how to vet them, right, or they're trying to do something malicious, you can get the short end of the stick there. And so because I think we had that experience in the past, while this was a much bigger issue, we kind of kept our heads on as straight as we could and just we're going to take full ownership of this and we're going to do right by the client and try to make good, because I think at the end of the day, our reputation is the most important thing in business. So, there was obviously some upset, but we tried to stay as level-headed as we could.
Yeah, and I think you said something really insightful there. You did the right thing by the client. I know other people have been in situations, and there's a couple of things they do. They'll fight the client, or they're trying to negotiate. Oh, I'm just going to pay you half or a quarter or whatever, and they just point the finger at them, or they'll just disappear completely. They won't even own up to it, or they'll do stuff like that. That's happened to me one time in particular. Something similar happened to you. One of them cost me $60,000. The guy disappeared. It was a nightmare, but I did the right thing by the client, right?
Totally.
And that's what it comes down to. And going back to those conferences, not just a attorney conference, but any conference, these are small worlds. It might be, you go to LeadsCon, you go to Felix, it's massive. There's tens of thousands of people at these shows, but the cream of the crop is really tight. It's a tight inner circle. So that negative news, if you did the wrong thing by that particular client, I guarantee you a whole bunch of other attorneys would have found out, your existing clients would have found out, and they would have cut ties with you.
Sure.
So it's a real business decision. It's not only just ethical, but it's business-wise. You got to do the right thing, because you do the right thing by then, you stay alive, you keep moving in the right direction, and you got to live to fight another day, man, and come up with other solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's business. I think you can only really fail if you stay down, right? Every day's a new day. So we just try to make every day better than the one before.
Yeah, I love that. You can only fail if you stay down, right? So I had a similar experience at the $150,000 issue, and I made it right, and at first I was like, man, is there I was trying to think if there's any solutions to it. Let me just, I got to bite the bullet. I was wrong. And boom, we did it. And we allowed that to happen. And then I wound up making with that client probably $4.5, $5 million in revenue over the next 2 years.
There you go.
So that was a cost of doing business. That was my ignorance tax is what it was. But if I didn't do the right thing by them, I wouldn't be doing business with them. And I wound up making, I don't know the margins were, but definitely 7 figures.
Yeah.
Something like that. So I had to pay the 150, pay the piper, pay my and guess what? Now I'm stronger. We have compliance departments in our company. We audit, we do this, we do that. And knock on wood, we haven't had any issue in years. So I think, and that's going back to what I was trying to get to. That's that's the origin of TrueCall, right?
Yeah.
So how did that whole thing evolve? Obviously you had this issue, it impacted you. Did you think, man, I got to create a solution for this so it doesn't happen again? I got to help other people out?
Yeah. So originally the idea was like, after that happened, we were like, we just can't take any inbound calls. We had to do everything internal and that's fine, right? That's obviously a workable strategy and there's nothing wrong with that. But I started asking myself the question, like, why does it have to be this way? You know what I mean? Like other businesses, such as the larger insurance carriers, brokerages, they all rely on some third-party marketing strategy to scale and augment their internal efforts. And why does it have to be where we can't trust this stuff to the degree that we won't even touch it? Like the risk is too great. And that just didn't like add up to me. And I was like, there's got to be a way to do this where we can have some confidence that what we're getting is what we're paying for. And it's not coming along with all this baggage in terms of liability and risk, right? And so, initially the idea was like, let's create something for our agency in order to be able to buy calls, right, from third parties and not have this issue. But then it quickly turned into like, why would we keep this for ourselves? You know what I mean? Why not help all the colleagues and friends that we have in this industry to protect themselves from these issues, and really try to have a positive impact on the industry? And that was really the genesis of like, okay, we're gonna figure out the solution and we're gonna bring it to the world.
So let's walk through what exactly TrueCall is. I have an understanding, but for someone that has no clue about this, let's put it like in layman's term from the very basics.
Yeah, absolutely. So TrueCall is essentially a tool to document evidence of consumer call initiation. That is at its core what it does. So in its current state, it lives on landing pages wherein we can document that evidence of consumer call initiation. We work in tandem and are agnostic to call tracking platforms, and we seamlessly integrate with them. And by doing so, we're able to create an ID, right, that contains a bunch of things, but this ID is then able to be passed with the call and validated in real time via API. So the great things about this solution, which took us a while to kind of figure out how to do this in a way that wasn't super friction heavy, because obviously click-through rates and friction for consumers is never a good thing, especially when you're talking about advertising dollars. And so we created a solution wherein it's not noticed by the consumer, under 10 milliseconds of load time on the page. And we're able to document everything we need to give the end user the confidence that, hey, somebody landed on this page, right? Here's what they did. Here's how long they spent on the page. And they called from this page, right? And by doing that, we can eliminate kind of the possibility of outbound calls kind of slipping through, right? Because they won't have this ID associated with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I'm going to bring it back to my example, which is similar to your example. What happened to me a couple of years ago in one of my companies, a pay-per-call company, we had a campaign in insurance, and we were starting to scale it. We went from like, I don't know, $2,000 or $5,000 a week to $10,000 a week to $20,000 a week, and we got it to like $40,000, $50,000 a week, right? And I'm like, God, this is great. Now we're going to get it to $100,000. We're going to start scaling. I was like, we're in that bright spot. And then I remember I was leaving a show in Vegas Friday, and I remember talking to the guy running the campaign, like, hey, did you check? Like, we wanted to make sure we're getting a weird feeling about our partner on this that was providing the inbound calls. Something the guy working on my team said he heard a call that didn't make sense. It struck him like it was a transfer from an agent and not an inbound call.
Right.
So I'm like, something's not right here. I said, do you put this we had like a thing to protect against litigate all this stuff. Did you put that check in? I actually didn't. Like, we got to do this right away, man. And interesting enough, my flight lands. As soon as it landed, I got a call from the buyer saying, we got a problem. Like I got that dreaded call.
Oh no.
And the same kind of similar what happened to you is what happened to us. And it turned out that as we started investigating this stuff, the publisher we're working with, like, no, these are inbounds, don't worry about it.
Totally.
It turned out they weren't. He couldn't provide the evidence, and it turned out it was a litigator. All these dumb issues happened. So essentially, if your solution was available at the time and we had utilized it, that would have blocked that call from going through,
Yeah, it
correct?
just wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1000%. And, you know, just to make something clear too, you know, our system, it documents evidence of that consumer landing on that page and calling. And then we also add a layer of fraud detection to ensure, you know, people don't try to game the system in any way, right? Because web and phone are intrinsically separate systems, right? And so we use available technologies to marry those two things, right? The web session, the consumer session, and the phone call, right? And so, you know, theoretically, without actually asking or subpoenaing a cell phone carrier, there's no 1000% way to guarantee that that call was consumer initiated. But what we can do is erect as many barriers as we can to make a system that prevents as much as humanly possible, right? Does that make sense?
No, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and make it extremely hard to get around, right? Where it becomes financially and economically not worth it to even attempt to do it. And that's something that we thought about a lot, was like, okay, great, we have this basic process, this basic system. You know, let's think about how we could try to get around this, right?
How to break the set.
Right, how to break this.
Like a hacker
right?
trying to get,
how
exactly.
to break this. So we spent a lot of time on that and figuring out every kind of which way that it possibly could be got around. And that's where our layer of fraud detection, where we, you know, leverage machine learning, is to prevent anybody from essentially trying to tamper with the system so we can maintain confidence in the system.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, what it comes down to is this. There's a lot of money to be made in lead gen, pay-per call, transfers, whatever it is. So there's always going to draw in unscrupulous people trying to get around, game the system. And that's what happened in my particular campaign. And what sucked about my campaign is that I had a separate campaign that was similar but different. It was a Spanish campaign that was crushing it. And the buyer threw out the baby with the bathwater. I'm like, at least keep the Spanish campaign going. No. And it sucked because it's hard to get, especially at that time, there weren't a lot of Spanish buyers in insurance.
Right.
Oh my God. So the opportunity cost, it wasn't just what we lost. It wasn't a cost in the $60,000 issue, but it was the future business that we lost.
Right.
It was that Spanish business that we lost. So all in all, I might say it cost us 60, but if I had to really nail it down, it was definitely mid to high six figures, maybe millions, man. So the bottom line is that as business owners, we want to cut costs, right? We want to get as much ROI as possible, but you have to invest in things that are going to differentiate and protect your bottom line, your downside, because if you don't do that, you're going to lose those clients. And 60,000, some people might be a lot. It might not be a lot. I don't know. Everyone's got different, it's relative at the end of the day, but it really was more than 60,000. It was at least 10x that because of what I lost in terms of losing the client. Like you lost that client. That's why it cost you millions, right? So I think that's the beauty of it. So how does this work? If let's say I wanted to be a client of TrueCall, which, and I actually just signed the paperwork. I'm going to be a client real soon. We're onboarding, right?
Excited to have
I'm
you.
super excited because listen, the bigger you become, the bigger target you get. You are. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. You know, I'm on this fucking show. Like I love my show, but like people see that, you know, they're gonna start to do some shit. So, but I got to be buttoned up at the end of the day. Anybody that's doing big numbers has to be buttoned up. So let's walk through the process. How does it work? How do people get onboarded? The whole nine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in terms of onboarding, well, we kind of broke down the system into two parts, right? We have generators, which is pretty much a catch-all term for anybody creating the phone call, right? And creating that ID. And then we have end users. So end users is really anybody in the chain of custody that is validating that call, right? Or validating that call with that ID. And so, you know, if you wanted to come on board in order to validate calls, those would be a paid account, whereas the generators are completely free.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
And that's awesome.
Yeah. And so, you know, essentially once you come on board, it's as easy as setting up campaigns and then setting up a simple webhook to do the verification. And also, you know, inviting the generators that you want to receive calls from, right? So you would go ahead and get a link and you could invite them and they could create a free account. And once they start generating IDs, you would then validate those IDs.
Yeah.
And things would transact as normal, but with this happening in real time via API, it will help prevent anything else from coming through other than what you're paying for.
Got it. So in my case, with where I had, or your case, if back 2 years ago,
right,
if this product was available, then I'd put it in my system. What would happen? I can kind of that rogue publisher, media buyer, affiliate, whatever you want to call them. I would have told them, and right now tell everyone, hey, for you to work with me, you got to use this. You got to use TrueCall. You got to sign up for this. And then that would have just made sure that call didn't go through. And then what probably would have happened is that would have showed this guy, he would have been caught with his shorts down. Hey, I can't do it. All these excuses would have come out, right? So
right.
That's essentially what I think is going to happen. You're going to really create transparency.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, there's a lot of, awesome publishers out there and generators who we've talked to who have absolutely no issue with integrating with this. But of course, there's going to be some who are doing outbound calling, right?
Yeah.
And they want to sell you what you think is an inbound call, but it's actually an outbound. And of course, those people are going to push back a bit,
Yeah. And so I like that because inbound calls are not easy to generate, especially at scale. And a lot of not saying everybody, but there's a good chunk of people that they have budgets to hit. And when you see you start to provide good quality, you see someone open up a budget to, let's say 50,000, 100,000, some really good number per day.
Right.
People get desperate. They get, the buyer's giving them pressure. So when people get desperate, they do desperate measures. So then they'll contact a call center. It's like, hey, let me get some transfers in here,
sure,
blend it in. And then the call center, they think is calling on good data, but they get,
they're doing blind transfers, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
So at the end of the day, you're shooting yourself in the foot. It's better off being honest, saying, listen, I can't deliver that. This is what's going on. But anytime there's money involved, that's what people do. They're looking to, not everybody, but the unscrupulous characters will do it. So I love that this creates that transparency.
Absolutely. And, our whole goal is we want to make this a win-win, right? We don't want this to be overburdensome to the publishers. And that's why we are speaking with publishers all the time, now that we've launched, about feedback and what would make sense and functionality and features to try to make this as seamless as possible. And we're really optimistic that the publishers who do decide to integrate, right, and do validate or allow for their calls to be validated, eventually might be able to seek more for their phone calls, right? They become more valuable, right? And we think that is a great opportunity.
And to the advertiser, it creates peace of mind. You can go to bed at night knowing that if you have everybody, let's say you're working with 50 different media buyers, affiliate publishers, if all 50 of them are on this platform, that, damn, the chance of anything happens is super, super, super minimal, right?
Yeah.
And then if something did happen, let's talk about, let's say you got a litigator that, you have these ambulance changers, litigators, that's all they do for a living. That's their full-time job. Let's say one of them came through and they say, they go to Mike, I'm like, hey, Dave, your company, they serve me, they say, hey, we're gonna do a class action, whatever. You got, I called your number or whatever. What's that process? Like, how do we contact your ops team, your account manager that you can just give that phone number to, and then they provide the proof?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we document the evidence of the consumer initiating the call on the landing page. So that could absolutely help in one of those situations where there's some kind of dispute of who called who, right? That's not to say that it would be absolutely impossible for some publisher who's trying to purposely defraud the advertiser to attempt to get something through, but it would protect the advertiser in that they would essentially have some kind of proof that, hey, no, you landed on this site, you called in, right? And be able to push back on that, right? And our whole goal is prevention. So while I can't guarantee and say that 1000% you'll never ever get that type of call, we can do everything in our power to reduce it, right, to as much as possible and as little of a chance of anything slipping through. And then you also have that evidence to try to push back as well if something does happen.
And if I were an affiliate media buyer listening to this, I think it gives you that credibility that, hey, you can go to your buyer and say, I just signed up for this. This is going to help you out. And we got to do whatever we can as lead sellers, right? You have to have any sort of edge you can get. Yeah. How are you going to differentiate yourself from the next person? It's such a competitive landscape, right? The cost of media goes up this happens. It's hard to manage accounts. So when you have that, it shows that, hey, you're doing what you can. You're adding another element to protect your buyer, right? So I think that would be, so if anyone, the feelers listen to this, that gives you that sense of a little bit of differentiation from your competitor.
Totally. You know, we think that the affiliates and publishers who use this will kind of stand out, right? And be able to rep and warrant that, hey, like our calls are legit, right? They're coming, they are what we say they are.
Yeah, great. And again, like I said in the beginning, business is fraught with ups and downs. It's like every time you think you're making it up the hill, something seems to come out of nowhere, kind of check you and test your resilience, take you backwards. And the fact that you guys, that could have been, for most companies, would have been a knockout punch.
Sure.
Like Mike Tyson knockout punch, you got right. That's what that could have been. But you guys took that punch, you know, you took it, you ingested it, fucking hurt, but you came back stronger, and now you have a solution that benefits everyone. And I was talking with Adam, he's like, you know, rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
And you're going to help create a rising tide in terms of the compliance for pay-per-call. Pay-per-call is not going to stop growing. No. It's going to keep growing. So now you have a solution there. Yeah.
Yeah. And our idea and our goal is not to, like, we're trying to be as neutral as possible, right? We want to give and empower the generators and the end users to be able to manage their own risk and their own compliance, right? We're simply an enabler for that aspect.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So how does it work in terms of the integration? Let's say someone's on Ringba, they're on Retriever, Finex, or whatever. How easy is it to integrate with those systems?
Sure, it's super simple. I mean, Finexa, Retriever, Ringba, they have similar concepts and they work based off similar principles. And so as long as you can receive and send, you know, webhooks, you're pretty much good.
Yeah.
And as long as that platform has what's called dynamic number insertion or number pools, then you're also good to go.
Good. Awesome.
Yeah.
Sounds easy. Again, I signed up for the TrueCall. My team's working on it. I know I signed on whatever I had to sign to get it going. I'm excited because I feel like that's going to give me an edge. And at the end of the day, this business is all about credibility.
Right.
You lose your credibility, you're freaking done.
Right.
Right. And just, you can make a mistake one time. I've made several mistakes. I learned from it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
You know, but I think it's not necessarily about avoiding mistakes completely, because nobody's a saint.
Yeah.
Right. And we're all human. We're all trying to do big things, but it's how you own up to those things and take responsibility for that I think defines your character.
Absolutely. And the actions speak louder than words too.
Right.
And you paid the piper in your case, like I did in my case, right? With your client, you said you're sorry about it. And not only that, you created a product to help not only protect you. Initially, you did it to protect yourself, right? You did it to protect your company, but you realized, wow, this product is so good, I need to get it out there to market. Is what it
yeah, I mean, essentially, at the end of the day, like, I always think that our mission is more altruistic than anything. Yeah. It's like, I know you, Dave, you're a great friend. I have other great friends in this industry, and I have a lot of people that I've seen go through these same problems. And I just thought, how nice would it be to be able to contribute and make an impact and help those guys, because I care about them, you know, and I care about businesses who are doing things the right way, you know, because those are the people who help society and move things forward.
You're absolutely right. Small business. I've read some stat. I forgot what it was. It was like, I don't know what percentage of the economy it is. It's way higher than most people. I can't believe I forgot the stat, but it was high. It was like 60 to 80%. It's small businesses, you know. So I think small business is fine anyone under 50 employees.
Right.
But so it's just incredible. And you're about to get the next. You're at 45. You're going to be past that, you know, at some point soon. But, you know, congratulations to all your success. And I love being around people that always looking for solutions to help, because business evolves. There's always new challenges, and you'll create this product, and who knows, maybe it'll evolve in a few years. Pay-per-call will take a whole nother direction. Who knows what's going to happen, but
totally.
Yeah. And the good thing is that you guys don't rest on your laurels. Like, again, I was with Adam before, and he's just constantly looking, how do I create more value?
Yeah,
you're looking to create more value, and that's what it comes down to. The more value you create, the more money you can make, the more you can reinvest in your people, the more everybody wins.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we live in such an exciting time.
We do.
Where the tools available to us have never been there before, right? And therefore things become more creative versus, you know, money oriented, right? It's more about what can you do, right? What is possible. And I love that, because at the end of the day, I like to create things, you know? And so that's just that is what excites me, right? Like maybe the direction of the industry will be totally different in 10 years with the rise of AI. Who knows? But if you just constantly create and look for new ways to provide value and solutions, I think at the end of the day, you're always going to be doing well.
And great. I love everything you have to say. And you got to always continually, no matter how old you are, how young you are. And again, with all the rise of the new technology, we're just outside there. I saw the Tesla truck, whatever it is.
So cool.
It's funny. I saw one with about a month ago, first one ever. So now I see them everywhere. But hey, it looks kind of funky. But hey, that's you have these Teslas that could drive themselves. And I was in Dubai, and they're starting to create those like flying taxis. I mean, it's just crazy. You got to always be ahead of the curve. You got to evolve, and that's one thing. I've known you for many, many years. I know your partner David, and you guys, you don't rest on your laurels, and that's why I think that you've grown so much, and you're going to continue to grow. So with that being said, how can people find out more about you? How can they find out more about your product here, and how can they sign up?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you want to find out more about TrueCall, truecall.com, domain costs an arm and a leg. So I hope.
But is it TRUE call? CALL?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
We'll put a link there for them as well.
Yeah, sure. 1000%. And, hit me up anytime. I'm on LinkedIn or even Skype. Still I use Skype so much. And so, I'm sure we'll find a way to connect. But I'd love to show you the product.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Great product. Again, I won't put anyone on my show, on the LFG show, if they're not providing value. At the end of the day, I grew through partnerships for people that helped me get there. Leo's been one of those, him and his team has been one of those groups that's helped us grow. So check out his stuff. Protect yourself before you wreck yourself. In honor of Ice Cube, protect your neck in honor of Wu-Tang. But great having you on the show, man. Look up his product. Let's fucking go.
Let's fucking go, brother.